just want to make sure my face is on the re-edited version from now on. That's my only stipulation.
And we are back. Welcome to another interesting front-loaded transfer show where we're going to get down to a number of different topics. And tonight we're going to do a little bit differently because I've got a few questions that I want to ask. And so it'll be interesting to see what you guys have got as the answers. But of course, we don't do this without giving a little bit of an intro. So boys, Daz, Richie, Chris, how are we?
I didn't realize it was going to be homework. I didn't have my homework done. A Q&A session.
You need to stand in the corner then, facing the wall.
Oh, the teacher's coming out. You never take a break, Pete, even on your holidays.
Never.
You can tell it's A-level results day tomorrow, can't you, Dad?
It is. But how are you boys anyway? How's things?
All good.
Yeah.
Good, mate.
Glad on as normal.
Good stuff. And look, it's been another interesting week on everything Newcastle United. And like I said, we're going to do something a little bit different. So although the main man, Jordan Cronin, will be joining us shortly, we have someone making his full-loaded transfer debut. So welcome in the Chronicle's Charlie Bennett.
Here he is, the apprentice.
How we doing, boys? How we
How's it
doing?
going?
Wasn't to be on the show, lads. We've been linked with nearly every single Chelsea player, so I thought I'd wear a bit of blue.
Me too.
The same.
Just followed suit as well, I see.
Love it.
I get the memo, lads.
We're good to be on the show, boys. Always a pleasure.
No, definitely. Look, it was either we had a chat earlier. It was either you stay at home and have a few beers, or come and join the boys. And obviously you're here, so you wanted to be part of the chat to talk all things Newcastle United.
Oh, definitely, mate. Like when it gets to the tomorrow morning, when I wake up and I haven't got a hangover, I'll be thanking you lads for saving the day. I mean, I was looking a bit scruffy lately. I was starting to look like that a little bit worse for wear. So you just gave us an excuse to have a shave before I come on the show.
Me too.
That's a bonus.
You know what? Our guests always try and make an effort, and you are no different, Charlie, at all. So absolutely spot on. Great to have you on. And look, as I mentioned, we're going to get down to a lot of the talk, and we have got a guest in the background because, as I tweeted out probably about 20 minutes ago, there are questions about a certain signing that may well or may not be happening very, very soon. And there's a lot of people that want to know a little bit more about them. So I've got a guest or guests that will come on and tell us a little bit more about this. However, I've got a question for you guys to start the show because I'm interested in what you've got to say about this. And it was a question that was posed to us last night by someone on social media. And I know, Richie and Chris, you may well have already responded to this, but it was from Ian Hall. Ian Hall, massive supporter of Loaded and a supporter of us as a channel. He's put, does anybody else think our fan base is going into meltdown for nothing? This club has progressed so much in 10 months. Please, Twitter wasn't around in 1988 to 1992. And he's asked us the question, do we agree with that? Now, Charlie, I'll add you into that question, and I'll come to you first about this. Now, it's an interesting question that Ian Hull has posed. Is that something that you agree with, or have you got a different opinion on that?
I would agree with that sense if you just looked at it purely from a Twitter point of view. I mean, Twitter's like that with everything, mate. I mean, football, the weather, bloody politics, anything. Like Twitter's just a more so than any other social media app. I'd say it was a lot more negative, and people go on there, and because it's a bit like a diary where like you can sort of see, just went to shop the day if you wanted, right? Everybody sort of whinges on there. They use that as like Twitter's their sort of wall that they can throw stuff on. And I think that's a bit like what was it Ian? Was it Ian with the question?
Yeah.
I think that may sort of be the case there, mate. I think you know, Twitter's just a small fraction of the Newcastle fan base. You know, if face to face, if you're speaking to a Newcastle fan in a pub, in the shop or whatever, in the taxi, you know, everybody's sort of happy still. Everyone's still optimistic. I think that's just the way it sort of goes on Twitter, mate. Everybody loves a moan.
No, I think that's a fair point. Look, thank you, Roy.
Cheers, Roy.
Always a supporter of the
Cheers,
channel.
Roy.
Always in there with a super sticker. Thank you for that, and we appreciate all the super stickers and donations that we get from the for the channel. You know, we all massively appreciate it. Daz, I'll come to you. You know, it's an interesting question there from Ian Hall. Is that something you agree with? You know, it has the meltdown around, you know, whether it's been transfers or anything Newcastle United has been maybe a little bit for nothing or maybe a little bit over the top.
Okay, first of all, Pete, I want to give a shout out to Paul Tweedy, who has just DM'd me there to give him a shout out. I met him the Forest game. We met him in the Black and White Bull pub. So cheers for watching, Paul. Now back to the question. Yeah, I saw that question come in, and it's great that we're going to tackle that first. No, there is no need for a meltdown yet. And look, at so much has happened in the last 10 months. Look at from where we were to where we are now in the new area, and even the infrastructure changes that are going on in the background of bringing in a CEO and a sporting director and so on and so forth, and a manager that can manage and trains our players at least more than twice a week. But yeah, there will be a cause for a bit of meltdown though if the transfer window was to end now and we didn't bring in some more players. I don't think that'll happen. We are going to bring in more players, such as who we bring in, and we know we'll get onto that as we discuss further. But yeah, I think everyone's expectation. I think we tackled it when we had Matty from the Magpie channel on there on the other day, where the expectation was so high at the start of the summer transfer window that you kind of have to readjust. But we still want something extra going into a long season and in our attacking department. So save the mini meltdown until the transfer window closes, and hopefully it won't be any need for one.
Yeah, no. Again, I think that's more than fair. It's a case of just waiting to the end of the window and assessing things there. Look, Richie, you've obviously you tweeted in response to this last night. You know, I don't know if you just want to kind of reiterate your stance on this.
I just basically said I think people are forgetting where we were 12 months ago. You know, we were struggling to get a loan fee for Hamza Chowdhury, for Christ's sake. You know, like we struggled to get Joe Willock over the line. So much has happened in the last 12 months, and we've got to be thankful for that. You know what I mean? This club's in the best place it's been in for, you know, God knows how many years. Probably it's like as a off the field back in and as a business, it's the best hand it's ever been in. Full stop. You know, it's not even in its. You know, when we were going to the entertainers days, have we looked this good off the field? But then you feel, you know, just because we've signed 3 people so far, one who was on loan last year, it means nothing. It's, you know, I'm glad that we're not just, you know, or someone says 50 million, right? Okay, that's 50 million. 60 million, all right, we'll give you 60. Do you know what? I really, really like the fact that we're not being, you know, bent over and spanked to get however much someone says they want to get. I'm glad we're playing hardball with these teams because it means that we're not going to be a pushover. You know, they're wanting 30 million and we're offering 20. You know, that, you know, even if we get halfway, that's 5 million saved. That could be, you know, in 12 months, 24 months, whatever. That could mean a lot for FFP and stuff like that. That's 5 million. It could be someone's wages, or it could be a signing on bonus or anything. So for me, I like the approach. I'm not stressed. I agree with what Daz said to the degree that I think that if there wasn't any more signings and we're sitting here in 2 weeks' time and we're in the same boat, I think there's probably be a lot more of the fan base a bit more disgruntled. But at the end of the day, we've still got to remember we are still in a much, much better place than we were 12 months ago.
I think there was an interesting comment today in a piece that George Corrigan wrote he's co-written in the Athletic. He said Newcastle aren't trying to copy Manchester City; they're trying to make sure they don't copy Everton. Obviously, everybody knows what Everton have done. Everton have spent £500 million since Mashiri bought them. and look where they are. They look like they could be in a relegation fight, and financial fair play, not financial fair play, like the Premier League's equivalent, to sort of cripple them a little bit. They're having to wheel and deal a little bit in the window. They've had to sell Richarlison. So I think Everton, if Manchester City are the blueprint to follow, Everton are the ones to be wary of.
I think you're absolutely right. And look, we've talked about this on the show previously, and we've said that the last thing we want to be is another Everton. And look, Chris, you've said it yourself, because you've got a lot of I think you call them blue nose fans that are local to you. Look, I think Charlie's made a great point. We don't want to be another Everton, but what's your perspective on things?
Yeah, so like Richie, I actually replied to Ian's tweet. I think it was fair of Ian to say it, but I do take Charlie's point in that it probably we are just solely basing this purely on the Twitter fans. We don't see the whole fan base, which obviously it's very difficult to look at it from hundreds of thousands of people's perspective. But I wrote back to Ian and said, I think we all want to see the club progress as quickly as possible, but as Mirdad said, patience is a virtue. Good things come to those who wait. It's a marathon, not a sprint. But I'm not going to lie, if and when we do make signings, I'll be very excited. And for me, I can't remember the last time that I trusted an ownership like I do this one. In fact, probably the last people that I trusted anyway. I mean, some people will say, they'll still remember that, the day when we sold Andy Cole, when Kevin Keegan was on the doorstep of St. James's Park and, having to defend the reason why he sold Andy Cole. So some people, would argue that even then players were getting sold, from under our feet, if you like. But I think, you're going back to Bobby Robson days, aren't you, for when we've had such a stabilised club. And in the last 14 years plus, it's been anything but that. And I think, I forget who said it, it might have been Mitch on NUFC Matters, and he was saying, I think sometimes people just want things now, and they have to just wait. They have to just take a step back and just enjoy the ride for what it is. We're not gonna be challenging for the top of the Premier League now or next season. It's going to be a journey. It's going to be a long road, but a very, very enjoyable road, because now, compared to what we've been doing, as I say, the last 14, 15 years, now we're competing. Now we're trying to build. Now we're trying to get better. And really, we should all just embrace it and just enjoy it. And, as I said on my tweet, good things come to those who wait.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I think, boys, some really good points. Lots of different points in there. But I think it gives the message out there, certainly from a social media aspect that Charlie mentioned, is that, look, patience is a virtue. We just need to make sure that we are patient, that we wait and see how the end of the window pans out before we then kind of make our judgments in terms of how the club has gone about their business. And look, we've still got 2 weeks to go. Lots and lots of movement to happen in between that time. So let's just be patient and see what comes of that. And look, that brings us nicely on to the transfer window in itself. And look, things have popped up in that time since we spoke last week. And actually, a lot of the talk now, and we'll come to it right now, in this point, has been about this man, Joao Pedro. So a little bit left field that it came out a day or so ago that we'd had a £20 million bid rejected from Watford. There was some question marks about whether we're going to go back in or not. As always, Fabrizio Romano is mentioned that we're preparing a new bid. And that was yesterday, looking at, between the likes of 25 and 30 million. It's moved on slightly. Craig Hope has said that there's going to be an improved offer. That was this morning. Interestingly, from the Chronicle, you might know a little bit more about this, Charlie. It came out from Lee Ryder that Joao Pedro is coming across frustrated at the fact that this deal hasn't been concluded. He's talked about him being really, really keen on coming to Newcastle United. And then also the likes of Peter O'Rourke have mentioned that we're going to submit a new bid. Jordan, who will be joining us shortly, has talked about, and he's raised an interesting point and said it shouldn't be a surprise, ticks a lot of boxes, only 20 and has room to grow. And interestingly, and we'll come back to this in a second. Charlie, you put on there, do you believe Joao Pedro would improve the starting lineup? So I'm going to ask you that question right now, Charlie. Is that all the talk about Joao Pedro? Do you believe that he improves our starting lineup, in your opinion?
Well, funnily enough, when I put that post on, I'll tell you the short answer is no, I don't. But I put that on, and I wanted to put it on in such a sort of non-partisan, neutral way, just to sort of gauge what people thought. Now, I sort of made a prediction before I put it on. I thought the majority is going to say yes here. If the deal breaks down, I was tempted to run the same poll again, and then see if the majority still said yes. You know what I mean? Because I think that's the way it can sort of work. I sort of seen it with Ekatike a little bit. Yeah. My opinion is, I want to see he'd be a good signing if we signed him, knowing he's going to be one for the future. But I think if he was to arrive and he was to be the only arrival, I think that would still leave Newcastle a bit short. I look at the front three against Brighton. Wilson, Aaron, want to say Maximin. Even against Forest for the first hour or so, yes, we had most of the ball, but it took a 30-yarder from Share to break them down. Newcastle, Eddie Howe even admitted it himself, going forward is sort of our weakness right now. And does Joao Pedro get in the team? Possibly instead of Aaron one. What I think we need is somebody that's going to come in and sort of change our front three. Yes, Pedro would be good for the future, good off the bench, squad depth, all that, but I still think we need somebody that's like a no-brainer signing that's just going to instantly improve the front line.
Interesting. Interesting thoughts and good opinions there. Now, boys, I want to get the rest of your opinions on Joao Pedro, but we have two very special guests that are coming to join us. We know them quite well from away days, and they're the Watford fans from Do Not Scratch Your Eyes podcast. So we have Justin and Pete that are going to come and join us any second in the live panel. Here they are. Welcome, guys. How are you?
Hey, guys. See you again,
Hello,
Pete.
boys.
How you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, Justin. How are you? How's things?
All right, mate. Yeah, apart from we're going to have no forward line at this rate. Apart from that, yeah, right. Everything's rosy. Hello,
Okay.
Chris as well. Remember you from last time. So, hello, everybody. How are you? You're good.
Welcome, lads.
Oh, good. But look,
We've got two Pete's now. We've got two Pete's now. This
Going to get confusing.
I'm fine. To avoid confusion, just call me Charlie. That's fine.
Well,
I was going to say, if people get confused, just call me Dave, because most people either call me Dave or Pete or whatever it is. So we've got a couple of names, Pete, so we'll be absolutely fine.
We call you Pedro.
Why not? Why not? I think it's the right way.
If you pay 40 million and you get me, you have every right to be disappointed. That's all I'm saying.
We'll thrash out a deal here now.
You laugh, but me and Justin are starting up front against Preston on Saturday for Watford, by the looks of things. So.
Looking forward to that.
I think at this point now, it's clear that you guys think that Joao Pedro is on his way. Are you? It was rumored today that actually that there was another bid coming around the 30 million mark. Are you at that mindset now, both of you, that Justin and Pete, that he's gone, that he's going to be a Newcastle player very soon?
Good. Do you want to start with that, Pete?
It's probably too early to tell. One of the things, just reading a lot of the comments from all you guys who are watching, a lot of people are saying, we don't mind spending big, but it's got to be the right person. This lad, people will look at his stats. Last year, he was playing in a team that was beyond hopeless. I mean, it really was shocking. And yet he still came up with some divine moments. One at your place, obviously, in the 88th. Just get that in there, obviously. Yeah. But during the season, his stepfather, who's been massively influential, passed away. Massive effect on the lad. He was struggling up front. We were all over the place. So really, you shouldn't judge him on what he did last season, because what he was playing in a mess of a team. When he had played and had some support in and around the Premiership, the kid is mustard. You talked about working across the front three. He can play anywhere across the front three. But what you are absolutely buying, and this is where I think Charlie's point about one for the future is you are buying somebody with absolutely, if you do buy him, massive potential. And that is why Watford fans are currently kicking bins and anything else that will move at the moment at the thought of losing him. We've had Sarr, we've had Dennis, but the one everybody wanted to keep is Pedro. He had a stinker last night. Anybody who saw him last night at Birmingham, don't judge him on his second half there. It's completely atypical. He is a strong lad who is starting to grow into a man's body, and he yet hasn't got his fixed position. I think he could be the next kind of Roberto Firmino personally, because he's got a great touch. He's incredibly strong. He can beat people for fun. He can find a pass, and he can finish when he's got something playing behind him. If he goes up to you guys and has better players playing him around him, he'll be fearsome. And I think he could be, he could fill a number 9 shirt up there, which is, let's face it, saying something.
Yeah.
I think you also have to bear in mind he's not even 21 yet, I don't think. I think he's still 20 years old.
Yeah.
And we've seen him for, it's probably the 3rd season that we've been watching him, and there is something special about him. He is developing and he is growing into a very, very good player. I wouldn't want to put a price on him because, I don't value footballers, but 20 million did feel a bit low, got to say. I think, if you do get him, you'll like him and you'll treasure him. And I think he'd be a good player for you too.
I think a lot of the people at Watford would see 30 million, even that being very low, and would want a massive sell-on percentage, because obviously once he comes to you guys and with your ownership now, he's only going to go to the Bernabeu or maybe Juve, maybe Bayern, maybe the Nou Camp if they ever sort their finances out. That's where he would go, and it would be for big money. And I appreciate you. We're talking about a kid who's playing in the Championship here, and you should probably be quite rightly going, yeah, whatever. No, this kid is the real deal. Genuinely, you will be bringing in some potential that could be a legend on the Gallagate, definitely.
Pete, it's really interesting that both yourself and Justin have said that, is because, those thoughts, and look, Richie, I'll come to you in a second with this, is that those thoughts are actually, the opposite of what a lot of Newcastle fans have been thinking. They've thought, because he's in the Championship, because his stats in terms of his goals and assists haven't stacked up. It's one of them where we think, he's not good enough. He's not at that level. Richie, from what you've heard from the likes of Peter Justin, has it changed your perspective on him? What was your perspective on Pedro before we started the show tonight anyway?
To be fair, and I'm normally all right with overseas players and younger players, but I didn't know much about Joao Pedro, so it's nice to get the opinions of the two Watford lads. I must admit, when we were rumored to be looking at Watford targets, I always thought we'd possibly be good for someone like Sarr, because we've got that dire need of that right winger sort of thing. And obviously he's had some fantastic appearances when he's been in the Premier League. So I thought he was the natural one we would probably go for out of the three. I know Dennis was looked at. He had a decent goal return. I saw a tweet today saying that that he couldn't believe they'd let Dennis go. He'd scored so many goals in the Premier League. They'd had Maxwell Cornet go. These were people who are 20 million and 17 million, but we're looking to be paying more than that for someone whose stats were technically worse. So, I think it's one of these transfers where it's really, really split the fan base. But I think people have got to realise he's still young. He's 20, and as the lads have said, this is the player that they wanted to keep most. So for me, that's what gives the lad best way. It's that's what makes the most of it. The team doesn't want to lose a player. For me, that means he's the better of the three that are up there who've been there. So for me, if that's the case, I know they might be getting a 30 million handshake for getting them this way, but I think by the sounds of it, they'd prefer to keep them than get that money, to be fair. So it's nice to hear those thoughts, but obviously if it's one for the future, and we know the way that Eddie Howe can coach and what he can bring to the people, the way he can develop them, then it could be one of these ones where, as Pete said, he might go at a level where the only teams that can be able to nick him in the future are possibly your Real Madrid, your Juventus, your Bayern Munich, and your Barca's.
To touch on that point, what you just said about being somewhere with a reliable coach, because Eddie Howe has always been a developmental coach as much as a manager. If you look at Joao Pedro, since we signed him, we've had about, literally 12 managers, something like that. We've probably had about as many patterns of play. He's had about as many positions. I mentioned earlier on, we don't necessarily know what his best position is. That's been because of the lack of stability at the club in terms of the management side. It's one of the idiosyncrasies of being a Watford fan. If he gets that, he could really be something. And the reason why Watford are picking out, Watford fans are picking out, because he's the one we want to build the side around, because you've been able to see from about the middle of last season that he's growing into the body that's developing. Before he was a kid who we'd bought in from Brazil, and he wasn't quite maturing. Now you can see where his physiological development is taking him. His tactical head and his technical ability are already there. It just needed his body to catch up, and he's now he could really be something quite fearful. I mean, myself and my son had a conversation, and this is when we had Sarr and he was playing well, and we thought that genuinely Joao Pedro could be the first £100 million player leaving Watford. He is that potentially good. If you get him and you harness him, you've got something. But if you get him and you loan him back to us for the rest of the season, we'll love you to bits even more.
I think the one thing I must say that I did take from a lot of the comments, obviously we know he's a good technical player, as you've just said, Pete, was the fact he's got a good work ethic. He never stops running and stuff like that. So he's going to help, develop that press from the front that Eddie Howe wants to deliver at Newcastle. So with there's a lot of things that people say, like, young lads or overseas players don't sometimes have that work ethic. So I think that's the one thing I've took from a lot of the readings from like Watford fans and some of the Newcastle fans, that out of everything, even though he's a really good, technically gifted player, it's his work ethic that stands out most.
The reason he had a shocker last night, and he did in the second half, he didn't do well. One, perhaps his head had been looking at some headlines. That's fair enough. At that age, you guys with your background coming, your head's going to be turned a little bit. But secondly, was because he was trying to get into all sorts of areas to come and affect the ball, because it had to go through him because nobody else was performing. He never hid once. He doesn't. If it's not working, he'll go and he'll look for it again. He'll look for it. And you guys know a thing or two about forwards. Yes, they all miss, but it's about the ability and the propensity to get into the position to get the next one when you've missed the last two that kind of count. The kid has got a lot of character. His family have been with him. As I mentioned, obviously he lost his dad, but his mother and other people are there. So he's of sound background. He's of sound personality and temperament. Because if you're going to put that kind of money down, you need to make sure that that's the case. And if you do get him, he will be watched both enviously and very, very fondly by Watford fans.
I think the other thing to say is, sorry, just very quickly, if you'd have said we're buying Sarr, I'd have gone, okay. And if you'd have said we're buying Dennis, I'd have gone, good luck. But the fact that you're looking at buying Pedro is just, it's not nice for us Watford fans, because we were really looking forward to seeing what he was going to do this season. Yeah. So he is a very, we've said it, he's a very, very good player. And I think if you do buy him in a year's time, you'll be saying to us, you were right. He's fantastic and he was worth every penny.
Sarr is absolutely world-beatingly devastating for 3 minutes a game. If you knew what 3 minutes they were going to be, you'd got the manager from heaven.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
I knew there was something coming from there, Charlie. I knew there was something. But Charlie, you wanted to just say something.
Yeah. I just want to ask, you have made us a lot more optimistic about the signing, lads, because I don't know if you've heard us before when I was saying I feel like we need someone for the here and now. I know that you've had another Brazilian who was about the same age who we also signed from Fluminense. He's just been sold to Tottenham this summer for 60 million from Everton. How would you compare Richarlison to Watford? Similar sort of age, similar style of play, would you say, or which one was sort of better?
Do you want to take this, Just, or shall I?
Well, you're more technically minded than me, Pete, so you'll probably be able to explain it better than I can, I think.
That translates as I'm a gobshite, basically. Let's be honest.
I want to say that.
But... yeah. Cool. Richarlison was that much further along when we signed him. Pedro was a lad, and he came in a really difficult time. When we signed Richarlison, we had Marco Silva, and he was flying. He was absolutely ripping up trees. Everton came sniffing around. As you said earlier on, don't do an Everton. That's always good life advice as far as I'm concerned. But Everton came sniffing around. Marco Silva's head turned, and he then sulked for 6 months. You have not seen, through manager change and different system change, you have not seen this lad sulk once. And I appreciate what you're talking about, his technical ability. Richarlison was probably about a season or two ahead of him, I would suggest. We are now seeing, at this moment in time, and this is the frustration from the Watford fans, we're just about to see what we suspect is going to be Richarlison's breakthrough season. So whoever's doing the recruitment up there and looking at him, and having a look at who are their front three they're picking, you're doing a better job than Forest and Palace or Leeds or whichever one of the no marks are doing going for Sarr. He is. I would take him, and I would suggest if he's not ready yet, season after this, he will be pulling up trees.
Interesting.
Class.
Chris,
Class.
I'm going to come to you, Chris, because Michael Palmer in the chat has made it very, very clear. He said he's not worth 30 million with that goal return, guys, and he's been obviously very vocal in that, which, Michael, you're always very vocal, and we absolutely love that about you with regards to your opinions on all things Newcastle United. But I'm just going to share this with you. Can you see that on the screen?
Just about.
Nearly. Here we go, yeah.
Yeah, can you see it now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so what I'm showing you, Chris, is Joao Pedro's defensive stats. And as you can see, green is good. So you're looking at, you're not just looking at the tackles, you're looking at the dribbles. So his tackles in the attacking and defensive third, 76 percentile, 87 percentile. So you can see his pressures in the attacking third, in the mids. Okay, the attacking third isn't quite there, but certainly in the mid thirds, which tells you a little bit that he might sometimes play off the striker, which I think Justin and Pete have alluded to. His blocks, his shot blocks, interceptions, clearances, all in the green. You know, thinking about Eddie Howe and the way he wants his forward players to play with intensity, with work rate, is this why he wants Joao Pedro at Newcastle United?
Quite possibly, yeah. I mean, we know that Eddie Howe expects his team to work. I think the only exception to that rule you could argue might be St. Maximin, but even we've seen in the past 6-12 months there's been an attempted change of St. Maximin, and you know that's probably for a separate discussion, but you could argue that that's maybe been the detriment of his attacking play. Yeah. Because he's never quite looked the same, St. Maximin, for a long time now. But those stats that I'm reading, Pete, you know, they look incredibly good. Particularly when you brought this up, particularly depressing. And you know, we know that Eddie Howe has a lot of time for Miguel Almiron. And if you could offer us, you know, a player with potential who's got the traits of Miguel Almiron, but perhaps I always use this word, who perhaps has got a higher ceiling, and somebody who could develop into a better player with better finishing, with better end product, then you know it could be one hell of a player we've got on our hands. And you know, I do take Michael Pomar's point. You know, football can be stats based. You know what I mean? But ultimately, you do have to look at the all-round game, and that's always been my defense of someone like Miguel Almiron. You know, I look at what he does on the pitch, I look at what he brings to the team, and let's not forget, as you know, you and the lads have already pointed out, this lad's 20. This lad's 20, and all the things that you know our Watford friends Justin and Pete have said show that, you know, sometimes it's not just all about the stats. You know, they're watching him week in, week out, and all the traits and all the positive vibes that we're getting about Joao Pedro are exciting. And maybe that's why, you know, that we're talking about a figure of more like 30 million to get him. But I'm excited by it. And as I say, big kudos to Justin and Pete for cheering me up, because I think a bit like some of the other panel members, I've been a bit, you know, I've always looked at Emmanuel Dennis, I've always looked at Ismail Assar, and they're the ones who always seem to get the headlines. People have acknowledged that Joao Pedro could be a good player, and you know, some people have said, oh, you know, he's a decent little player, but for, you know, the Watford fans to be upset over losing Joao Pedro ahead of the likes of Dennis and Sarr can only be a good thing, because you know those lads watch him week in, week out.
Definitely. Look, you're absolutely right, Chris. And you look at the it's the successful pressures. Look, these stats are over the course of the last year. So this, you know, there's an element of this that kind of, you know, goes into the last Premier League season as well. So you look at the likes of quality of pressures and the blocks, everything in there. In my opinion, is what is exactly what Eddie Howe is looking for, in my opinion, from that. And look, I'll go back to it in a second, because you asked the question and you mentioned something just a second ago, which I thought was quite interesting, is that you mentioned Miguel Almiron. So I'll bring Miguel Almiron's defensive pressures up, and they're still extremely high. His tackles, his dribbles, his successful pressures are maybe not as high. His blocks are not quite there. So although they're still very, very impressive defensive stats, we can already see that at 20 years old, Joao Pedro's performance in terms of that type of game that we want from an Eddie Howe player, it isn't quite the same in some areas. So just to give you that little bit of a comparison of what Miguel Almiron can give you, that was there. But that was really, really kind of an interesting one from that perspective, and it gives you a little bit more of an idea of Joao Pedro and his abilities. Lots in the chat have mentioned about the goal return, Daz. Is that a concern for you? I think there was 3 goals, 1 assist, in the last season in the Premier League. Pete and Justin have told us not to worry about that because they were playing in their words, a real poor, dire team.
Nobody scored for us last year. It wasn't just Pedro that wasn't firing. It was no one scored for us last year.
Yeah, and real poor and dire team really isn't doing us justice for the season that we had last year.
I'll be polite.
There really is no need.
We were dreadful, mate. We were beyond crap.
Yeah, no, it does concern me, people. Before you even brought up the stats, and when his name was first mentioned, I think we talked about with Matty the other day, is that I did look at some clips of him. He never looked like a number 9 to me. I know he got that header goal against us, but he does look like more attacking or on the wings kind of player. I answered yes to Charlie's poll actually today, and I'm willing to give him a chance at Newcastle. I think Eddie Howe can get something out of him, and with him being young, he'd be able to mold him and so on and so forth. And the whole link up with Brazilian hopefully works out as well with Joe Linton and Bruno. But the only thing is, though, and I think I said it the other night as well, the price we went in at first, we knew we'd have to go with the second bid, but I wouldn't be going any further than where we're going at now, because then it brings into the equation others that we've looked at, and a case in point, Ramos for Benfica, who's, as in the chat there, he's after scoring in the Champions League against Kiev tonight. So he to balance it out, I'd only go so far. For him, I wouldn't go any further. This last bid would be the final bid for me. I'd look at the others we've already looked at and we have on the waiting list, let's say. And I think that if we're looking for a striker, a number 9, someone to slot in for Wilson, I don't think he's the one. But as a kind of a Miggy replacement or an alternative, how could get the best out of him.
Great point to make, Daz, and this is what I'll come back to you, Justin and Pete, on this, and you may have answered it already, but I want sort of a definitive answer on that. Daz has asked the question. He said maybe not as a Callum Wilson replacement, I wouldn't have him, but maybe as a Miguel Almiron replacement, maybe on the right of the attacking 3, I would have him there. In your opinions, from what you've seen of him, definitively, where do you both individually see his best position being if you're going to play him in one position only? You've talked about him playing across the middle. It's been talked about and documented a lot. Where would you play him every week, all the time, to ensure that you get the best out of Joao Pedro?
Probably as a number 10, I would have thought, or an attacking midfielder, a midfielder playing high up the pitch. I would have thought he's not a number 9. I don't think he's not at the moment a number 9. There's no reason why he couldn't be developed into one, I wouldn't have thought. But for my money, he's probably a number 10. What do you think, Pete?
I think it depends what formation you're going to play, because if you do get him, you're buying somebody who is extremely tactically flexible. So if you're playing 2 up, he can play as a second striker. If you're playing a 4-2-3-1, he could play any one of that 3, and he could also play as a single one up front. genuine he can. His body is developing, and a lot of the video that you'll see is, unsurprisingly, as with all video from the past, he is developing. His body is coming along, and he's stronger than you would imagine. For a lad who you'll look at little things and think, oh, he's kind of bendy little rubber kind of running around. No, this kid's made of oak moving forward. If you're playing in the kind of a 3-4-1-2, you can play him in any one of those front three positions. If you're playing a 4-3-3, he can play any one of those across the three. That's what you're buying. You're buying flexibility in terms of what else can come in and come around. I was thinking about this earlier on. Sorry, just to kind of, obviously you have now got newfound riches, and of course the team who has done this before has been Manchester City, and I think a lot of people will be looking at Joao Pedro and thinking something along the lines of, oh, it is similar to the kind of Robinho signing, and I don't think it is. You're not bringing in a flash Brazilian to do that. You're bringing somebody in for the long term. You're looking at a David Silva kind of impact, i.e. over a prolonged period of time, because that's where the value is. And that's going to be why Watford will be playing hardball on the value. All of the people saying, look at the goal return, I wouldn't go for it. You're absolutely spot on. If you're looking to something on Saturday, would I be buying? But no, but your club aren't doing that. They are planning a bloody empire by the looks of things. They are planning for the next 10 years. And therefore, what they need to have in the building is people who are going to come in and be succession planning, and people who can, when somebody drops out, we can fit him in there. We can fit him in there. And I think he would be, I can't remember which of you gents said it. If he's got a higher ceiling, this kid, genuinely, the sky is the limit. I'm trying to. I should be on commission for this sale. I'm sure. I was
going to say, you're not Joao Pedro's agent, are you, Pete?
No, he wishes. Peter, which one position? And you gave about 9 there. I think
but that is the point. But that's the point. It was a great question. It was simply the wrong one.
There's a comment in the chat there from Wayne Patton. He says, "Give them Chris Wood." Now, Chris Wood, he hasn't really done too well for Newcastle since he came in January. Right. But in the Championship, he could be a force in the champ. And obviously, losing Dennis, would you be open to getting Chris Wood as part of the deal?
No, thank you very much.
Negotiations are going well.
That's that one nipped in the bud.
I think the thing which we're trying to do is we've now got a young manager in process. I mean, you've seen the difference between kind of the old and the new and the fresh and all of that. That's what we're coming in. So I think that's where we'll go for it. And the Pozzos, we've got these 3 lads who are in the process of going, it would seem, with Yao, and nobody can blame him for doing it. He doesn't know if this offer will ever come again. There's no kind of bitterness about that. If he does go, regret, yes, but bitterness, no. We'll go and find somebody who we've never heard of before. They'll bring them in. We'll say they're rubbish, and then in 2 to 3 months they'll turn out to be really, really good, and then the whole kind of cycle will return. Chris Wood's definitely not on our radar, I'm afraid, but good try.
We always try our best. But look, guys, look, you've been longer than what I anticipated. I only said 20 minutes, but I think everyone in the chat has said it as well. You guys have talked so much sense. You've given us a completely different perspective on the likes of Joao Pedro and what he could potentially offer Newcastle United. William Smith has said, "Do you want Jacob Murphy?" Is your response?
This is like a forum for agents, isn't it? This is excellent.
But on a serious level, look, I already know, and Chris knows because we've had you on away days a number of times. It's been a pleasure to having you on the show. I know you've jumped on last minute after recording your own shows. Thank you for your insight. I'm sure if the deal gets confirmed, I'm sure we'll have you on again to do a little bit more of a chat and what to expect from Joao Pedro. But I'll let you guys go. Just before you go, do you want to just plug your pod and where people can find you?
Yeah, you can find our podcast pretty much anywhere where you can listen to a podcast. So we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and everywhere else. Even the smart speaker system, I believe, we're on there as well. You can follow us at DNSYE_podcast. That's our Twitter, and we've got all sorts of things. I think we've even branched into TikTok today as well. So we're kind of everywhere.
Wow.
Can't miss us. Yeah.
Great. Boys, just a quick question before you go. Hopefully we'll speak to you before the end of the season, as Pete says, but are you just coming back up this season?
Well, I thought we were until we sold all our forwards.
Chris Wood is the answer.
Yeah, no.
that was a very polite no.
I don't know. I mean, in theory, we were one of the relegated teams with parachute payments and all the rest of it, so we should be there or thereabouts. If you'd have asked me that at the beginning of the season when we were, firing with 3 forwards, I'd have said yes. God knows now. Who knows? Let's see if we can recruit properly and, replace anybody that does go out the door. It's going to be very difficult to replace Joao Pedro, that's for sure. What do you think, Pete? Do you think we're still in with a shout now?
Well, you guys know what it's like when you go down in the championship. In terms of us, we had
that was a low blow, Peter.
No. I mean, I don't mean it like that.
Not
what
anymore,
I mean
though.
Yeah, they have. I know, absolutely. But we've still got that concern, and therefore we've had to shed about 60 million quid's worth of players so far. That included Dennis, doesn't include Sar, obviously doesn't include if you get Joao Pedro. We also hawked or bought forward, like a payday loan, for want of a better phrase, our 2 parachute payments. Personally, if we don't go up, this is like a shit or bust strategy, basically, because otherwise, what happens when you go past the parachute payments. You've got to do another level of reduction again. So I think we've really got to go for it if we possibly can. Oh, my apologies if I. So we've got to go for it, and it's what they do with the investment. Because if we sell the front 3, we've got to get into the market and get something. Fingers crossed, we do it.
Well, we for sure hope that you do it, because look. Away days is not the same without you guys. Looking at the previews to Newcastle United against Watford. Look, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Great to have you on, Justin. Great to have you on, Pete. Give Carl our best regards as well. We miss him too. And hopefully we'll be able to meet up with you guys for a Premier League game at Vicarage Road or St. James's Park in the future. But we'll let you guys go and enjoy the rest of your evening. But thank you for your insight. You guys take care. Speak to you soon.
Pleasure,
Cheers,
mate.
guys. Take care.
Cheers, boys. Thank you.
Cheers, lads.
Take care. So, has your opinions changed?
Yes, actually, yes. I mean, before they came on, I mean, obviously sent me a bit when I did the poll this morning, and little bit underwhelming when I seen the news of Joao Pedro, like looking at his stats, his goal return, not knowing where he would fit in, wanting somebody for the here and now. But listening to especially Pete, I mean, Pete, with joke on saying, is he Joao Pedro's agent? Like bloody hell, you give him some appraisal there, didn't he? I mean, he sounded like the bees and he's there.
He was spot on. That's Pete. We normally have Justin and Carl on. Pete's that was his first time joining us for a show, but his insight was absolutely spot on. Really, really good insight. And he's not. If people are thinking that he's kind of blowing smoke to big him up, I don't think he is, because they're effectively about to lose the player. So if anything, you want to be talking the player down. But in actual fact, he's telling us the reality of how good Joao Pedro could be. And actually, you've said, Charlie, that he's kind of changed your mindset on Joao Pedro. But the rest of you boys, Daz, Richie, Chris, have your opinions changed on Joao Pedro after that little bit of information from Justin and Pete?
For me, no. I was going to give him a chance anyway, and I just think no, it was that was from the last guy. Just the little clips I seen, but it's just that, as I said, I've said it 3 times now. It's just as the price increases, then my enthusiasm for the deal decreases. So because of the other options that should come back into play. But yeah, so that's me.
Chris, you were nodding your head enthusiastically.
Yeah, I was, because that's like a ringing endorsement. I mean, Pete, over the past however many transfer shows, we've spoken about Emmanuel Dennis going, it'd be a good signing, he'd be decent, and Ismail Assar, a few people were 50-50 over him. But then, for the Watford fans to just come on and be like, yeah, I don't care if they go, I'm bothered about Joao Pedro. That's great for us to hear, isn't it? And, and I know I'm repeating myself here, but when you're signing a 20-year-old, it's good, isn't it? It's not as if, like, if Joao Pedro was 28, I've got to be honest, like, no matter what the Watford lads said then, I'd be thinking, like, he hasn't reached, that top point, and we're signing a 28-year-old. I'm not sure, or he's been playing in a poor league. But this is a lad who, did well in the Premier League. I'll say did well because obviously the Watford fans were certainly a fan of him. They've acknowledged the fact that they didn't have the best of seasons, but that he was one of their shining lights. And the fact that they're wanting to get back in the Premier League and they're now facing a very tough Championship season, and they're worried about losing him. That can only be a good thing for us. So, and do you know what? To spout what most people have already said, like I'm fully behind, absolutely fully behind these owners and Eddie Howe. If they've highlighted that this is a player that they're interested in or that they want, I'm fully behind that, and I'll get behind any player we sign regardless of what I think, because what do I know? But we should always back any player that joins the club. But to hear the opposition fans saying that they don't want to lose him, and to know that Eddie Howe and the owners want this player, I think it's all positive.
Definitely. Richie, are you kind of still, or were you concerned about his lack of goal scoring record? And as the way in which Justin and Pete have talked about him, has that changed your mind, or are you still of the mindset that he would be a good signing for Newcastle?
I think he'd be a good signing for Newcastle going forward. As you said, I don't know whether it'll be a good sign right for the here and now sort of thing. I think one of the interesting things I think it was Pete that said was, he's got a very good comparison to Firmino. Now, if you look at Firmino in that front three of Liverpool, he hasn't got the greatest of goal scoring records. Compared to when he was played alongside Mane, alongside Salah, and also even we look at Jota when he came in last year as well. So, it doesn't necessarily, he could be a better player than Firmino. He might have a better goal scoring return, but he's got to tick a lot of boxes. And obviously, they said himself, he's not an out and right number 9. So you're probably not going to have the goal scoring return that you'd want off him. I think if he's looking to play on as a winger or a number 10 type thing, as the Watford lad says, you could be looking at something. If you're looking at to the 8, 9, 10 goals per season, then that's probably the sort of return you're looking for that sort of player. So and then you still want to look to get someone who's going to be fighting for that number 9 place with Callum Wilson, because you've got to look at the fact that Callum Wilson was top goal scorer last year with 8 goals, and he was out for a third of the season pretty much. That's we've got to get more of a goal threat within the squad. We discussed it last week that Joe Willock didn't have a season like he did when he first came on loan, where he was scoring pretty much every game. But we always knew that was going to be the case as well. So, I think it's a good one to get him in, develop him, work with him, take him forward, and see where he is in 3, 4, 5 years. But I think if we bring him in, I still think that we would need another forward player to go with him, sort of thing, because. The one good thing that the lads mentioned, and it could be just the fact this has been found out because he's had 5 different managers since he's been there, is he's versatile. Now, what people have said is, if we were going to go and get a winger that can play in numerous positions or something like that. So he's been said that he can play anywhere along the front line. So yes, that's a fantastic string to his bow, that if he can, he can play anywhere we need him to play. So if, as we discussed, is he a replacement for Almiron? Everyone said, yeah, you'll probably take that. Is he a replacement for Wilson? No, I think people would prefer Wilson over him at this moment in time. But that's not to say that he could replace him in a few years' time or stand in for him if he was to get injured. He's still got that extra option rather than just having to rely on Chris Wood. So I still think, get him up. Obviously, as long as you don't pay over the odds for him, I think it'll be a good sign for the future for definite.
I got the opinion from Pete and Justin that he would probably be better off playing just off the front man. Certainly from Justin, he talked about him not being a like replacement for Callum Wilson and playing off the left. And actually, if anyone watched him last night against Birmingham, yes, they both alluded to the fact that he didn't have a good game, and they gave reasons why. And one or two in the chat have mentioned that he didn't have a good game. I think Newcastle fans were watching him very, very closely last night in the Birmingham game. But the bits that I saw of him, he played very, very well off the left. He came off the side of the forward line and liked to link the play. I think his stats prove that. And look, we looked at the defensive stats, but I could bring up in a second, and I may well do, his other stats in the way which he plays, his passing, his dribbling, his ability on the ball is very, very good. And he almost strikes you as that link player, not the Callum Wilson type player. And that's the kind of vibe that I get from him, and I think Justin and Pete to a certain extent kind of alluded to that fact, and that's maybe what Eddie Howe and the team are bringing him in for. Look, we've got over 500 watching tonight on the channel. Thank you for tuning in. If you haven't already, just click that thumbs up. Click the thumbs up just to show your support for the channel. The thumbs up means that it goes out there to more people to be able to watch the channel, to see what type of content we bring, to see the guests and the likes of Charlie and one other that's in the green room that we'll bring in a second. I have to say about all things Newcastle United. So yeah, if you haven't already, click that thumbs up. If you haven't already as well, click that subscribe button. We are very, very close to 4,500 subscribers, on the way to 5K in just over a year, which is fantastic. And we will continue to build as we go along. But look, I'm going to bring in the main man who is slightly late, but has good reason to be. And I want to get his thoughts on Joao Pedro as well. So welcome in, Jordan Cronin. How you doing?
Hello, Jordan.
All right.
Hey, Jordan.
He's kept us waiting there. I was falling asleep.
Hold on, we were falling asleep waiting for you, Jordan.
Yes, sorry.
No, you know what we have to endure each week, Jordan.
Yeah.
And the master and the apprentice are united on the screen. It's
we are. Well, me and John, I don't know if anybody seen when I was on Steve's show a few months ago. Me and Jordan actually go way back in the Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 days, Jordan, don't we?
So we've came a long way since then. Bedrooms at age 12 and playing Call of Duty zombies, whatever it used to be.
Well, funny enough, I'll share with the audience. Like, obviously, I used to work on a construction site before I even thought about getting involved with sports writing and stuff. And Jordan did my course before me, and so I actually reached out to Jordan. I think I was like having me break one day on the building site, fed up, didn't want to dig holes no more. Seen Jordan rocking, I think I'd love to do that. So I messaged him, and throughout the course, I've reached out to him a number of times, and he's always been willing to help. So, mass respect, Jordan. Cheers, brother.
No, appreciate it, mate. Keep doing what you're doing. See, you've obviously graduated from uni now, doing stuff for Chronicle. So just keep doing what you're doing, mate. You're doing a sterling job.
Cheers, brother. Much appreciated, man.
Anyways.
Hello, lads.
It's like a United show again.
It is. And I'm sure you've been discussing even more over, is it Modern Warfare 2, October?
No, man, them days are done.
Don't get time these days. Don't get time to do that.
Too busy. But look, Jordan, welcome in as always. We've had a fantastic chat around Joao Pedro. We had the Do Not Scratch Your Eyes podcast. The Watford fans give us a fantastic insight on Joao Pedro. You might have missed a chunk of that before they left, but I just wanted to get your opinions. Like, first of all, what do you know about the deal with regards to Joao Pedro? How is it progressing in your eyes from what you can see? Thank you, Stephen, for your donation, £4.49. Thank you as always. But also, do you think he's the type of player that Newcastle United need right now, in your opinion?
Yeah, so on the first point, as it's been widely reported, obviously a bid went in, I think around 20 million rejected. Newcastle are going to put in a second bid. Watford's stance has always been that he's not for sale, but Newcastle seem encouraged that they can do a deal, so there will be a second bid going in at some point, probably by the end of the week, to be honest. And then we'll see what Watford do from there. In terms of the player himself, I would have liked to have listened to what the Watford lads had to say, because I'll be honest, I'm not too clued up on the player himself. I can only go what I've seen of him at St James's in January, and he was a menace, to be honest. Remember he got an altercation with a few Newcastle players. Had a little dive about as well. Obviously scored in the last minute for that equaliser and end up shushing the Gallagher. So I suppose from that sense, he's probably one of them players that you'd probably hate to play against, but love to have on your team. But look, it fits a profile that's probably emerging now in terms of the type of player Newcastle are looking for. So if you look at the links the players have been linked with attacking wise over the last few weeks, they had Hugo Ekitike, who is a player that can play in the central role on the wing. You've then got Ramos as well from Benfica, who can also play as sort of a centre forward and in a wide position, I believe. And then in terms of the age as well, Armando Broja from Chelsea, only 20, I believe. Hudson-Odoi is another one. So you can see the type of player Newcastle are looking for in that department now. That they don't necessarily want an experienced player to come in and compete for that front line. They almost just want someone that can potentially is understudy to Callum Wilson, or someone that can, if Callum Wilson gets injured, he can fill in at centre forward, or they can play on the wing. So certainly looks like, I say, there's an option where they can play in a couple of positions. So say there's a theme building there. There's Newcastle want young players that can grow with the football club. So yeah, certainly on the Pedro deal, it seems there's one to watch. Will it get done? It all depends on Watford's stance. But look, he ticks a lot of boxes, being his age, and the fact that he's Brazilian as well. Which over the last few months, few years, we've seen a lot of names and a lot of links to Brazilian players, South American players. Obviously, we've got a couple of ourselves at the minute with Bruno and Joe Linton. So it's a market that Newcastle are looking in. And clearly, Eddie Howe's obviously impressed by the player himself. To be honest, I can't tell you too much about him. So the Watford lads have probably already done that anyway. But just in terms of the deal where it stands, a second bid will be going in, and we'll just have to wait and see what happens there. See if Newcastle can get a deal done. But I say he isn't the only player that Newcastle are looking at. I say it's 2 weeks today or 2 weeks tomorrow until the transfer window shuts. There's inquiries galore at the minute. You see from the Chelsea news as well. I think there's probably about 4 or 5 players Newcastle are interested at Chelsea, which has obviously been widely documented as well. So it's going to be a busy year. Newcastle are pushing to fill that attacking or strengthen the attacking line.
That's why me and Daz are wearing blue tonight, Jordan, because all the links to Chelsea. It may be a little bit of a good omen for her.
Possibly, yeah. But look, it's like I say, Chelsea was almost in football in terms. It wouldn't make sense for Chelsea to loan a player to Newcastle, because I think in a way you're helping them build a project where they almost want to be on par with Chelsea. But look, there's clearly a good relationship between the two clubs. We obviously seen Amanda Stavely and Murdoch Gadusi at Stamford Bridge on Sunday, so there's clearly a relationship building there. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a Chelsea player walk through the door before the end of the transfer window.
Look, let's stick with that chat, because it moves nicely on to the next section, which was the Chelsea quartet. Really, is that those boys that Chelsea have that Newcastle are apparently looking quite closely at from Chelsea is one of the 4, or maybe more of the 4. You got Conor Gallagher, you got Callum Hudson-Odoi, you've got Christian Pulisic, and you've got Armando Broja. From that point of view, you've got 4, in my opinion, top players there that Newcastle United have potentially been linked with. What I want to know from you guys is that, if we were to, and it's been rumoured to, that potentially we could pluck maybe 2 of those players, maybe get one on loan, maybe get another on a transfer fee. Is it, in your opinions, what 2 players would you go for? So, like Daz, I'll start with you. What 2 players, if you were given the opportunity, out of that 4 players from Chelsea, what 2 would you go for?
Okay, this is gonna sound, anyone that saw the show the other night, this is not Let's repeat. So yeah, the two for me are, and the reasons why I go for them are Conor Gallagher, and he's the one I'd pay the transfer fee for, because I think getting my next player that I'm going to suggest, we wouldn't be able to afford him. So I'd pay the fee for Conor Gallagher. I think, and as I said the last night, he's been outstanding anytime I've seen him playing for Crystal Palace and so on. But the only time he didn't play well is when he played against us. We seemed to keep him quiet that night. So I'd buy him, and if it was, I know the fee mentioned was around 40 million, a bit steep, but yeah, I'd take him at that. And then the other player I bring in on loan is a player that Man United were looking at today as well. But if, as Jordan says, if Chelsea are scratching their head with doing a loan deal with Newcastle, they definitely won't do it with Man United. But yeah, so I bring in Christian Pulisic, and the reason why as well, I don't think we'd be able to afford his transfer fee this season unless there was a loan to buy. And because I think they bought him for like 58 million from Dortmund originally, but then the whole marketing side of Christian Pulisic being at the USA captain, going to the World Cup, and Darren Earls coming in and now wanting to break into the American market, wanting to put have fans in the USA wearing Newcastle kits and going over for our tours and everything like that. So there's the two I bring in, and bringing in paying a decent loan fee and even paying his wages for Christian Pulisic would pay off if you consider all those factors into it. So it's a no-brainer for me, and he's a good player. He's a decent player, and he could play on the wing. That's me.
No, obviously gave your opinions on Monday, I think, with the Magpie channel. Chris, your opinions, who were the two that you would target if we were able to pluck those players away from Chelsea?
Yeah, so I think I've passed opinion on this before, but I don't think it was on Monday on the Magpie channel, so I don't know whether we spoke about it previously, because I seem to remember saying I would sign Brozier permanently and I would bring Gallagher in on loan. But to be fair, I don't think Pulisic and Hudson-Odoi were on the table at that point in terms of the question. So out of the four, for me, no question about it, Pulisic is the main one out of the four. I think he's the one who's the most talented. I mean, if we got Pulisic, I think he's different level. So for me, I would always pick Pulisic. Given the whole argument around the wages, and let's not forget, he hasn't got the best injury record. That is a concern. So I'd probably get Pulisic in on loan, just to see how that went, and obviously see if there's a deal to be done at the end of the season. Obviously, he's on, so we're led to believe, north of 150 grand a week, which would obviously break our wage structure. But if you bring someone in on loan, then players can't really argue because they're in on loan, and it's just, their wages are what their wages are, or whether we can negotiate, a smaller percentage with Chelsea. But in terms of a striker, I've been praising Armando Brozier pretty much since about 3 or 4 appearances in for Southampton. I just think he ticks loads of boxes. Great age, tall, strong, powerful, quick. I just think he ticks a lot of boxes. And again, his age, I think he's 20, 21, so he's only going to get better. And I think you could probably pick him up for anywhere between 20, 25 million. So I that is personally who I go for, Pete. I'd try and get Pulisic on loan. I'd try and get Pulisic on loan, and I would try and sign Brozier. Because I think I made a controversial comment about Gallagher, saying that I don't know whether
I quoted you as well.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's your opinion. It's your opinion.
Yeah,
it's not controversial at all.
Do you know what, Dad? Just in case anyone's missed it, I'll say it again. I think we've gone beyond Conor Gallagher. I'll be honest. He did fantastically well at West Brom. He did fantastically well at Crystal Palace. And I'm not saying we're too big for him. All I'm saying is, when you're getting linked with the likes of Maddison and Paqueta, they're different level to Conor Gallagher. Yeah. So for me, I feel, but when you're talking about the likes of Pulisic and then Callum Hudson-Odoi, this was a player who was linked with Bayern Munich not all that long ago. And Bayern Munich aren't soft. They're not gonna approach a player and try to pay him over 100 grand a week for no reason. And I think he's probably just been a little bit unlucky in terms of the manager changes, in terms of not playing regularly for Chelsea, and maybe not being loved as much. He ended up being a bit of a Victor Moses for Chelsea. He started playing right wing back, And Callum Hudson-Odoi is not a right wing back. You know, he should be playing up top. That's where he's dangerous. That's where people spotted him. That's where his threat is. So in that order, Brozier to sign, Pulisic loan, if not Callum Hudson-Odoi. And I'm not saying I wouldn't take Gallagher, but he would probably be my last choice.
Chris, can I just come back at you there? In relation to Gallagher, okay, Maddison, you're going to need 80 million to get him. And Lucas Paqueta, we don't know because Jordan didn't ask Eddie Howe the question in the press conference last day. Like, gave him one job,
didn't we?
one job, and he didn't ask him. So
Daz was not impressed, Jordan. Daz was not impressed at all.
I had to play it safe. This week.
Okay.
After I annoyed him last week, I couldn't be doing that again. So I had to stick to injuries this week. Give us a couple of weeks. I'll start asking some proper questions again.
Nice one.
Good stuff. Look, Richie, we didn't get a chance to ask you your opinion on this. Obviously, you weren't able to make it on the Monday, but in your opinion, is your options for the potentially any one of those 4 Chelsea players different to what Daz and what Chris has said, or are you the same mindset of the similar type of players?
I think first of all, what we've got to say is we'd probably take any 2 of the 4 if we're in the, do you know what I mean? So beggars can't be choosers. Do you know what I mean? So another thing we have to bring up though, because I've seen a lot of it going on Twitter. People are saying, "Oh, let's just go on loan, Pulisic on loan, Gallagher, whatever." You can only have 1 loan from each Premier League club, so that's never ever going to be an option. Just for anyone who's unsure, and that you can only loan from 1 Premier League club each. For me, I think the best player, hands down, out of the 4 is Pulisic. Hands down, he's got the experience from when he, obviously, he's national team captain for the USA team. He's played at Borussia Dortmund at the highest level, Champions League, Bundesliga. He's won the Champions League with Chelsea. He's got Premier League experience. He's hands down the best player that Chelsea have got, who are possibly willing to let them go. I think it's good news that that Chelsea don't want to let Man United get him, because obviously it's strengthening possibly what you class as a direct rival now. Whereas Newcastle, they're probably more open to do business with us because we're not classed as a direct rival as yet. So that's probably the one out of the 4 that I would definitely go for. I think if you're looking on the other 3, I think Brozier, obviously, he's as a few others have mentioned, he's a bit like the same sort of mold as Pedro. He's still developing as a player, full stop. So you could get him in as a development, and possibly he's probably one of the more realistic ones you could probably buy. If you look at the costs and stuff like that. You look at Gallagher, fantastic 2 seasons at West Brom and Crystal Palace. But I think what we need in midfield is a creative midfielder, and I don't think he necessarily fits that mold. As Daz mentioned, we've had the Maddison links and stuff like that. He's not in that sort of mold. I see more of a number 8 box to box, skillful, and a bit more of a better version of probably what you could probably say is something like Sean Longstaff.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily what we need at this second in that midfield, especially when you've got the strength and the of Joe Linton, and he's box to box, and you've got Bruno who can pretty much do anything in that midfield. So I think to play Bruno where realistically you want to play him, you need a creative player in that midfield, and he doesn't really tick those boxes. So the other one for me would probably be Callum Hudson-Odoi. Literally, you've seen what skills he had a couple of years ago. Yes, he's had a few injury worries and stuff like that going for the last couple of seasons, and he's fell out of favour. As we've said on numerous different shows before with different players, when people like teams like Bayern Munich are looking to buy you, that means you must be a player of at least a certain standard. And for me, getting him back on the pitch regularly, once again working with a coach like Eddie Howe that seems to get the best out of everyone, I think it would be fantastic. And bear in mind, we said his age, he's just turned 21, I think. So he's already Premier League experienced, and he's still technically, for age-wise, he can develop with the club, and he's one for the future going forward. So for me, out of the 2, it would be Pulisic and it would be Callum Hudson-Odoi.
Interesting. Two attacking wingers as your options in from the Chelsea
I just think we need a vast overhaul of the front 3, and technically the only one we've got as a goal threat out of the 3 is Callum Wilson on a game-to-game basis. Almiron, he scored 1 goal last season, and then obviously ESM hasn't really done much goal threat wise at all really last season as well. So we need something a bit more, as a threat on a game to game basis rather than just one every 5, 6, 10 games sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, ASM, he got 10 goal contributions last season, which is the best he's had since he's been at Newcastle. But like you've just said, Christian Pulisic or Callum Hudson-Odoi would certainly stretch him for that. They would at least push him for those type of contributions within a season if they were to sign in the next couple of weeks. There's no doubt about it. So it's an interesting and different type of perspective because you've gone for two of the similar type of positional players. But like you've said, we need a revamp of that attacking third. And I think everyone would agree with we need some attacking impetus there. Look, Charlie, I'm going to come with you with a different type of question here. Is that, I'm going to come with you specifically about Christian Pulisic because for me, he's my number one choice. I would love him at Newcastle United for the reasons that Richie said. And I think, he would be the player that would improve our first 11 instantly. But there's been talk that Man United have been interested with him today. And there's been links that saying that Manchester United are interested in. Sky have said, there's interest from Man United, but Chelsea might not want to sell or loan Christian Pulisic to Man United. But are Manchester United a better option than Newcastle United at the moment? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that was a little bit of a left field one the day, wasn't it, with Christian Pulisic going to Man United? It's almost like Man United. I don't know if you've ever seen that game show that's on at 4:00 in the afternoon. I think Ryland hosts it when people are just running through the supermarket dash or something it's called.
Supermarket sweep, is it?
Supermarket sweep.
It's the old classic.
I thought it was TV's Castle or something like that.
The problem with you, Charlie, you don't remember the original supermarket sweep with Dale Winton.
I'm too young.
Dale Winton.
I'm too young. But that's what Man United are sort of doing in the transfer market. The link with every Tom, Dick and Harry. But Christian Pulisic, the question beforehand when he was asking who the lads would prefer, that was going to be my answer. I've seen Christian Pulisic, a lot on the telly watching Chelsea, and he can have a game where he's absolutely electric, and then he can have a game where he sort of blows a little bit hot and cold. I don't know how old he is. I think he's 24, 25?
23.
23.
So he's still a young player, really. Yeah. And I think with Chelsea, he's in and out the team. He's not getting the sort of a run of games consistently where, the manager's going to back him. We all know what Eddie Howe can do as a coach. And this season in particular, with Raheem Sterling, Hudson-Odoi and Pulisic they're going to be looking to leave. I'm sort of raw to this. I don't claim to be all known or anything, but the sort of the noise coming from London would be that Hudson-Odoi would be the easier deal to do. Chelsea are sort of supposed to be a little bit unsure whether to let Pulisic go, but they'd be more open to letting Hudson-Odoi leave. Hudson-Odoi, I think he only started 10 games for Chelsea last season. Then obviously he's a boyhood Chelsea fan, but sort of the faint noises is that he's sort of coming round to the idea of leaving his boyhood club.
Interesting. This is why I wanted to get your opinion on it, because it's an interesting situation with with both of those players. And look, I'm going to come on to a different question for you, Jordan. Is that we've talked about the Chelsea players, and Richie and one or two others have alluded to the fact that we can't kind of discard any of those players because of the fact that they're quality players. But one of the things that's been alluded to the fact is that how much money they're currently earning at their current club. And Newcastle United have been very, very particular in terms of they are sticking to their wage structure. Now, there was a comment from Mad Mark and said Pulisic is on around £150,000 a week. How much would Chelsea?
£150 a week. If
we'll bring him in on that.
Yeah.
I wish it was because we'd be able to afford him, no problem at all. But £150,000 a week. How much would Chelsea support or facilitate a loan move for us. Now, look, I'll go back to Callum Hudson-Odoi, and I want your opinions on this, Jordan, as well. Is that Callum Hudson-Odoi is on £120,000 a week now at 20 in his early 20s. He's on more money than any other player at Newcastle United right now. So he already breaks our wage structure. Now, you're looking at Christian Pulisic on 150 grand a week, and that goes way beyond our structure. Now, the question says, how much would Chelsea support to facilitate the loan move to us? Now, in your opinion, would you want to break the wage structure that Newcastle United currently have in place to ensure that that level of quality player comes through the door? Or would you be, methodical and strict on your mindset of that Newcastle have to stick to their wage structure in order to appease the rest of the squad? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Very, very good question. But not just addressing the wages first. I don't think Chelsea would have an issue with paying a part of his wage, to be honest. You might look at it and think, Newcastle will have to pay, or I'll have to cover all of that, but I don't think they will. But if they had to, I probably would be in favour of it, because, look, he comes into Newcastle's team and he's ultimately a class above, if you like, and improves that forward line ridiculously. So I'd be in favour of covering the full wages, because there's going to come a time where Newcastle will have to pay that money for players. And look, at the minute they're doing it the right way, because they're not splashing the cash, if you like, in terms of, or even the transfer window and on wages as well. They're doing it in a very measured way. But there will come a time where, say, in a few years' time, when Newcastle, touch wood, hopefully do qualify for Europe and then look to push on for those titles, they're going to have to sign that sort of another big signing where they will have to pay top dollar wages.
What's Trippier? What's Trippier pulling in? Trippier's pulling in about that anyways, Peter, I think, isn't he?
Apparently, Kieran Trippier I think he's around 110 grand a week.
Was he?
So he is the most expensive in terms of how much we pay out for wages, which, look, if you believe the media in January, and look, Jordan, you're on the shows in the Full Loaded Transfer show in the build-up to that, there was talk that Trippier was asking for 180, 140, 150 grand a week. Actually, he's on 110 grand a week, and actually he's around the same mark of wages. In fact, the exact same wage that he was on at Atletico Madrid. So he hasn't deterred. He invested himself to Newcastle United. Would it take someone like Callum Hudson-Odoi to go, you know what, I was on 120 grand at Chelsea to sit on the bench, but actually, if I'm at Newcastle, would I drop my wage to show that I deserve to play every week, to then maybe, if he performs in a season and we buy him on a let's say on a permanent deal, yes, I then go to that sort of amount to challenge some of the best players, because my potential deserves that. I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so just on Trippier, and I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think this is the case. So I think he's on a base of £100,000 a week, and then he gets appearance fees on top of that. So it could be like appearance fee £20,000 a week or a game, whatever, and then obviously that adds on to the £100,000. I think the same goes for Bruno as well. I think Bruno's quite a big earner. But yeah, the on Hudson-Odoi, I'm not too sure on that deal. I'm in favour of the player coming, but in terms of, and this might just be like a really poor outside view, but is there an attitude sort of issue there with the player potentially? And look, he's 21, he's earning, he said there, £120,000 a week. Does he feel like he wants to, or he has to take a wage cut? Does he feel he can go in Europe elsewhere and get the same wage or whatever? So it just depends. I think if you're looking at Hudson-Odoi, at this current moment, it's going to be a loan deal. And for me, if Newcastle do a loan deal with Chelsea with for Hudson-Odoi, I believe Chelsea will pay part of the wages. So yeah.
Yeah, if I was earning 120 grand a week at 21, I would not be on this podcast today.
You would.
I'm laughing here, but then I feel offended by that. What's going on?
No, I'd be in a beefer somewhere, just living it.
No, look, come on. Let's be real here. You'd be in a beefer on the beach somewhere drinking a couple of beers or whatever, but you'd still be you still have a Mac in front of you, and you still be on a pod with us, but you'd be living the high life.
I'd be lucky to see 22, Pete. Put it that way.
Love it. Always a good chat and good laugh. But look, I want to move on to a couple of other players very, very quickly, because again, a couple of these players have been hot in discussion. And look, Jordan, I'll start with you. As far as I'm aware, in the chat, he scored again tonight in the Champions League. In the qualifying rounds, we've been keeping a very, very close eye on him. I have in particular, because I really, really rate this player. Goncalo Ramos was kind of alluded to the fact that he was almost going to be a done deal at one point, in that Newcastle were just ready in a bid, that we're going to put a bid in and it was going to be accepted. Wolves have now come into the equation. There's been talk about potentials of we're waiting until the qualifiers of the Champions League are out the window before we make the signing. Look, what are your opinions? What is your knowledge on Goncalo Ramos? What is the update from your perspective on things with regards to him potentially signing for Newcastle United?
Yeah, so there's not much change from last week, to be honest. I know the interest is still there. Whether an official bid goes in remains to be seen. But it's a player that Newcastle really, really do like. So I mentioned last week as well. Obviously, Eddie Howe seen the player firsthand in pre-season. Scored against Newcastle, and then the form he showed in the competitive games, particularly in the Champions League as well. Obviously, scored a hat-trick against Midtjylland, and then he scored tonight as well. So yeah, the sources in Portugal, I see you mentioned it there, Pete, about potentially maybe a sale could be sanctioned after the play second leg Champions League qualifier next week. So obviously, if they get past Dynamo Kiev, then it's a bit of it's a luxury. The Champions League football is obviously great money, so maybe they might, if they get Champions League football, they might look at Ramos and maybe sanction the sale. If they don't qualify, which I'm sure they will, but if they weren't to qualify, they might look to cash in anyway, because they don't have that Champions League money. But I don't think Benfica won't qualify. I think they'll get past Dynamo Kiev. So
Jordan, they're 2-0 up away from home, and Ramos come off after 63 minutes. So just normal sub, not injury or anything like that as well. So it looks like they're safe enough.
Are they preserving him, Daz?
Preserving him for the second leg, I'd say.
What's going on?
It is one that could potentially accelerate after the second leg next week. But at this moment, he's a key player for Benfica. They're currently in a Champions League tie. So again, the interest is very, very strong. Just have to wait and see what happens on that one. But from last week, no change really. But that date next week is potentially one to watch. The Wolves connection probably makes it a little bit more interesting if that is genuine, because we all know Wolves' links to Portuguese players, with obviously Mendes as a super agent, if you like. PSG have been interested as well, but I think they've signed enough attacking players this summer to maybe let Ramos go as well. Hugo Ekitike won't be getting a look in next season if they go and sign another forward. So The Wolves situation is potentially an interesting one because of that Portuguese connection. But no change at the minute. Just have to wait and see after next week when they play the second leg against Dynamo Kiev.
Charlie, surely we can't let Wolves beat us to another Portuguese player again. There was Guerres that eventually signed for Wolves off the back of Valencia, and there was talk just before that deal went through that Newcastle were interested in him. For me, and I'm just talking about personally, I've looked at this player, I've watched him play, I've seen his quality as a forward player. I think he could seriously, in my opinion, challenge Callum Wilson for a starting berth because of the ability he has in the box. From that perspective, can we really let that player just walk by at 21 years old?
Well, I think Jordan mentioned it there. I mean, Wolves have sort of got the trump card, haven't they, when it comes to Portuguese players? I'm not sure. Is he Jorge Mendes' agent? Potentially,
Yes.
Probably. I'm going to say probably is. He's sort of monopolised every sort of top young Portuguese players, and he's Jorge Mendes. I'm not going to lie, I don't know too much about him, but just from the Newcastle links, looking into him, doing a little bit of research. Obviously, he played against Newcastle in pre-season. I think he averages a goal every other game for Portugal's like you've said, under 21 team, and then obviously towards the back end of last season, he was sort of rocking it for team with a better word. For Benfica, so yeah, I don't know too much about him, but he looks. If I'd have said this morning, would I rather have him or Joao Pedro before speaking to the Watford lads that came on the night, I would have said no brainer. But speaking to them Watford lads, they've sort of changed my mind a little bit. And Joao Pedro, I still think we would need Joao Pedro and somebody else. We need somebody for the here and now. Joao Pedro, we mentioned it before, sort of looks like one for the future.
Why not both, Charlie?
I mean, we're Newcastle are the best club in the world after all, aren't
it? Who knows? That could be a play as well. Getting Pedro on the wing and Ramos up front.
Do you not think the sort of, if going back to Ekitike, the word on the street was that Eddie Howe wants a sort of younger forward. So do you reckon it would be either or? You know what I mean? Do you reckon it would be Ramos or Pedro? I don't know. I couldn't see Newcastle getting both in. That's just my opinion, anyway.
No, I don't think we'll get both personally.
Mm-hmm. I think it would be an either or thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
I've just been called James off in the chat.
Sing us a song.
What's going on?
No, hey, Charlie, that's not for the first time, surely. That's not for the first time.
What's going on? I wish he's a smoggy for one, isn't he?
He is.
Oh shit! That is not good at all. But look, guys, we've had a plethora of questions come in to the chat tonight, and it'd be rude not to answer some of those questions.
Pete, I was just going to say before you go to the questions, I wanted to speak up something about Ramos, only because we were talking about him. Last year he scored 8 goals all season, but bear in mind he was playing second fiddle to the guy we thought we were going to go get in January, and that was Darwin Núñez, right? Yeah. He's already got 5 and 5 in competitive games so far, now playing up front as a forward. So for me, I think he's the one that could make a difference now and be for the future. I think he's the one that Newcastle should try and go out for. Whether looks like they're going to progress to the Champions League qualifying round, whether that's something for them, you might want to stay at Benfica another season because he plays guaranteed. As he said, he's going to be playing Champions League football guaranteed, and he's the main man now. Could that change things? Possibly, but it's one of those things. Is this one of the windows where you'd have to strike now to get him?
Yeah, I think so.
Look, we talked about this in January. We talked about with a number of players in the summer. Is that there are certain players that are only available for a short window of time, and if we want those players, we need to get them right now. Look, Goncalo Ramos, for me, he is a player that I would take right now because I think he's the player that can genuinely challenge Callum Wilson. If Callum Wilson isn't having a good game on 60 minutes, he could come on and actually could actually get a goal or two. What astounds me about Goncalo Ramos is his ability in the air. Yeah, if you saw the goal at the weekend away from home, he just has this knack of in this 6 to 9 yards out in the box to be able to move in between centre backs and just win the ball in the air at canter. Now, I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking he's doing that in the Portuguese league. If he could do that in the Premier League, he would get even more goals. The amount of balls that come in to the box, and our players, our strikers, our midfielders that don't have the ability to get onto the ball in the air, you know, even at kind of head height, he has the ability to do that. And for me, I just think that he is ready to really perform at a higher level. And he's only had a short period because, like you said, Richie, Darwin Núñez was the main man. They thought he was going to be the main man that would take them forward. But I think his progression has been so fast, so rapid that he's ready to move on now. And you know what? Sounds really kind of out there, but he would be the kind of player that if we brought in this season, that he would potentially go toe-to-toe with the likes of Darwin Núñez in terms of goals and assists and creations in this season in the Premier League if he was playing for Newcastle United. That's just my opinion. That's just what I've watched of him. But let's wait and see on that. Let's see how it performs over the next week or two. But without a doubt, I do not want Wolves to get hold of him because I think he's a supremely talented player that will only get better at 21 years old. We've got a number of questions in here. Let's fly through some of these questions. Some really good questions actually in the start section.
Yeah, start off with Paul Williams. How many more do you think we will sign? Personally, he thinks he'll get the need for 2 for start 11 right wing and right of midfield 3 and a backup for Wilson. If we get 3 this season, then really set up for success. So what's everyone's lads' thoughts on that?
I'll go first. I think they'll get one in, and I think they'll get one in, but I think they'll try desperately hard to get another one in. So I think at an absolute push 2, I kind of see we're signing 3, 4, 5 players before the end of the window. I think there'll definitely be one in, and I think they'll bust the gut to get a second.
Interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'll be at least one, and they'll absolutely push to get a second. Maybe one to watch out for as well. I think Newcastle are probably an injury away from dipping back in for another midfielder. I think it's hard to go off on one game, but I think if you look at the weekend, I don't think, and I had this argument last week, and obviously fans have their own opinions as well, but I don't think Bruno is as effective in that Newcastle team as a deep line midfielder or the sitting midfielder role. I think we need him further forward. So I know Eddie Howe's quite happy and content to play him there, but I wouldn't be against another centre midfielder coming in, a sitting centre midfielder to push Bruno back up in that number 8 role. So at least one, possibly 2 and 3 depending if an injury occurs in that midfield again. But it should be okay. Sort of well stocked there with obviously Sean Longstaff, Joe Willock, and a few others as well.
Like Stengari from PSV there, Jordan, as an example of someone who were, I think it's 2-2 with Rangers in the first leg of the qualifying as well for the Champions League. So if they didn't get through, maybe he's someone that would come into play.
Yep.
Good shout, Pete. Numbers.
What's that?
How many do you think we'll get in?
For me, personally, I think at least 2. I wouldn't be surprised if Newcastle United bring 3 in. I think I mentioned this to Chris earlier on in the day, whether he's seen it or not. I mentioned that I think we would probably get 2 in, and I think we would look at potentially getting rid of a third in terms of another player, maybe someone like Jacob Murphy, someone like that to get out of the club to bring in a third player. Just to bring in that level of quality up, so we've got better options off the bench. again, that's just my opinion. But I think there's a potential for a lot of movement in the last couple of weeks.
I think we'll get 2 in. We'll push for a third, but we won't get the third in. I'll be optimistic and go 3. Sorry, 2. 2.5. Chris.
Yeah, I think minimum 2, possibly 3. I think there'll be at least 1 permanent deal and 1 loan at a bare minimum. That we could see 2 loans. Not obviously, as Richie said, not from the same club, but we could certainly see 2 loans coming in. Could even be a deal where it's a loan with an obligation to buy, perhaps. Who knows? But yeah, I think the last week in the transfer window is going to be really, really busy. I think that's when you'll see a lot of movement, because I think players will become available who maybe aren't available now, or who clubs weren't expecting to be available. So I think there'll be some bargains to be had, and I think there'll be some players who pop up and they may be put to Newcastle and we go, okay, yeah, we can do that. That's how I see it. I think it'd be minimum 2, possibly 3. But I wanted to ask Jordan and Charlie a question, because again, apologies if I've got this wrong, but I remember reading a comment, I think it was on Twitter, and somebody said that Eddie Howe was quoted as saying, we've got 21 men in the squad. And I just wanted to know your theory on that, because obviously we've got more than 21. So do you think the likes of Federico Fernandez, possibly Matt Ritchie, possibly Jamal Lewis, do you think that Eddie's kind of already written those off and gone, right, they won't be continuing going forwards? Or do you think it's, there is the odd player, like Elliot Anderson, who doesn't count as a squad player? And maybe we've got, because we've got a couple of injuries, like John Joe Shelvey, people have already said that it's a strong possibility John Joe Shelvey won't be included in the squad, because he will possibly only make 1 or 2 games before we break up for the World Cup. How did you lads take that news or take that speculation?
So yeah, just to clarify what was said, because I was in the press conference at the time. So he got asked a question about the squad, and he said there was currently 21 to 22 players training.
Right.
And then that's obviously excluding the lads that have been injured. So I think off the top of my head, there's been 5 players injured. There's a John Joe Shelvey, Matt Targett's on that list now. Federico Fernandez, Jamal Lewis, they've returned to train now, but last week they hadn't been. I think there's a few others as well. So what you were saying in that is they've consistently, on average, had 21 to 22 players training, and he was happy with that number. But yeah, in terms of the 25-man Premier League squad, Eddie Howe always talks about having the group he's got now, he's really, really happy with. And I think that's why the target in terms of a striking position, a younger player who doesn't have to be registered with the 25-man squad, because he falls under that under 21s bracket. I don't think he wants to cut many from the 25-man squad. Who he'll cut, I think I counted up the other day, and you only actually have to cut about 2 players, I think, if you add it all up. And I think probably the obvious one, I think at the minute would probably be maybe a Federico Fernandez, possibly, because they've got plenty of cover there now. But I know he really, really rates Federico Fernandez in terms of his behind the scenes stuff and how big he is off the pitch. But there's some really obvious ones you cut from that squad as well, like to Matty Longstaff, who's training with the first team currently. He'll not be here. He'll go out on loan at some point over the next few weeks. Jamal Lewis as well. What do you do with Jamal Lewis? Because look, personally, I like Jamal Lewis, and I think there's a player in there, but the lad hasn't kicked the ball properly in 9 months or whatever it is. Or sorry, be 8 months. Sorry. So do you look at that and go, look, we'll loan him out, and hopefully he can have a good season elsewhere, and then he can come back next summer and reassess him, or maybe you will include him in the 25-man squad. So if you look at it as a whole, there's not that many decisions to make in terms of who makes the 25-man squad, unless they are to go and sign a couple of more players. And then that's what I mean in terms of the attacking position. That's why I think you're seeing a theme where they want to target under 21s players, and we've seen that over the last few weeks in terms of Joao Pedro, who wouldn't have to be registered. Broja as well, who wouldn't have to be registered. So yeah, there's a theme developing there, because I don't think he wants to cut many from the squad, but ones that he will have to cut, I don't think there'll be that many big decisions, to be honest.
I saw one point that might have been an interesting. You mentioned about the 25-man squad the other day, and it was, I can't remember who I saw mention it, but they were actually saying that there's a possibility, because of the World Cup when it is and how long the injury potentially is, that they might do with John Joe Shelvey what they did with Isaac Hayden, because of how long that injury's out for, and then how little playing time there is after the World Cup. They might, to create an extra space if needs be, just let him rest for the rest of this year and bring him back in the new year. I don't know whether you'd heard anything about that.
No, well, Eddie Howe got asked about that last week, and the journalists in the room expect him to say no, you won't be including the 25-man squad, because once the Premier League season resumes, there's only 2 games before that where it opens back up again in January, where you can play however, basically, because the registration's back open. But Eddie Howe said he was at this stage he was gonna include John Joe Shelvey in his 25-man squad, which to me doesn't make too much sense, because you'll have him back for 2 games over Christmas, which it just depends how he views the squad. Maybe there's just players in the current setup that he just doesn't want to name in and doesn't fancy them, so it would just be better off just naming Shelvey for maximum of 2 games. Personally, I don't think that makes sense, but I'm not going to sit here and criticise Eddie Howe for that. He knows better. He knows that he sees the players every day. He works the players every day, so he'll have a rough idea of who's going to make that 25-man squad.
I actually wrote my 25-man squad about a month ago, so I'm glad Jordan answered first, because it gave me a time to go through all the notes on my phone trying to find it. The 4 I left out was Gillespie, Watts, Dummett, and Matty Longstaff. Because of Matty Longstaff now, he's 22, so he's no longer a homegrown player. But this was based on Richie, Murphy, and Fernandez sort of scraped in. They were the ones where, like, if more new signings came in, they would be the ones missing out. So there is room to sort of wriggle there. There is going to be a few unhappy campers. I wouldn't be surprised to see a few outgoings before the end of the window. Maybe there's a few surprises. There's been talk of Martin Dubravka as well. I think if anybody's going to sort of perhaps like kick up a fuss because they're not getting in the team, I could see like the likes of Richie and Fernandez. I could see them sort of not being so like as much as Dubravka. I mean, Dubravka, he wants to play. His agents came out not long ago and said he wants to play. Obviously, him and Nick Pope are sort of fighting now. Nick Pope seems to have cemented himself as Eddie Howe's first choice goalkeeper. I wouldn't be surprised to see Dubravka possibly loaned out or on his bike before the end of the window.
Or Darlow as well as one I mentioned before, and I know I think Man United are sniffing around the Leeds keeper as well. So if that happens, they'll definitely need to bring in a keeper.
Yeah, definitely. Interesting one here, Mad Mark. One I wanted to discuss as well. Leicester Mercury. You're right. I've read the Leicester Mercury on a daily basis for those Newcastle United little snippets. Said that Newcastle on a buy now, pay later for James Maddison was verging on offensive, with reports of a 20 million fee upon a further 25 million paid later. Were Leicester City too demanding? Interesting question there. For anyone really that wants to answer that question, Jordan, Charlie, Richie, Daz, Chris, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think they were too demanding on that kind of question on James Maddison?
I mean, it would be a bit mad. It would be a bit mad, wouldn't it, from a Leicester point of view, as a Leicester fan, as a Leicester owner, like Newcastle. With this sort of wealth that they've got behind them now, want the sort of almost like I owe you a player sort of thing. But obviously, that's the way payments sort of go these days. Like structured payments are sort of commonplace in the Premier League. I do think that is would be a bit of a low ball offer. I mean, it's been mooted that Leicester are wanting around their price tag was around 60-70 million for Maddison. So I think that would just get knocked back. The bid that got knocked back anyways was around that fee, wasn't it? So I couldn't see them going anywhere near that.
Yeah, for me, that's a low ball offer. It is a bit insulting, to tell you the truth. I'd again, if I was playing Football Manager, I'd reject that straight away as well. I can understand.
Yeah. I think Brendan Rodgers said that the offer that Newcastle put in would be able to buy his left leg, didn't he? So,
Yeah.
and that was around 45 million.
Does anyone think that Newcastle United are going to go in for a third bid for James Maddison? Because I had a conversation with one of my Leicester mates who came around earlier on today, and he's seen ticket holder. He goes to every single game at Leicester, and he was of the mindset that, you know, Newcastle United, they don't see them as a viable bid for Maddison. But I said the one thing that reigns true is that with three key players right now, with Sven Botman, we put more than one bid in to try and make sure that we got him. With the likes of Joao Pedro, we have now put in two bids, or potentially two bids, to try and get him through the door. And equally, James Maddison, we've put in two bids. There's been question marks whether there's been a third. With those three players, we've put in more than one bid, which tells me that Newcastle United are really, really keen on them. Do you think that there's a third bid incoming, or do you think that after those two bids are rejected, that we're done with James Maddison?
There might be a third bid incoming, but I just think in terms of Leicester's valuation, I think that the two clubs are very far apart. If Leicester value James Maddison at £60 million, Newcastle aren't gonna meet that price tag. So there's gonna have to be some leeway on their end. Obviously, we spoke about this on the show a few weeks ago, and I do think Newcastle have received encouragement from somewhere to lodge those bids, but have possibly been a bit taken back by Leicester's valuation. Because look, Newcastle aren't stupid. If James Maddison valued at 60 million, Newcastle aren't going to come in and bid 35 million. It's just that's not very enticing for Leicester. So maybe they've had word that James Maddison's available, put a bid in that they feel is a starting bid, that building up to a reasonable bid, and they've learned that Leicester's price tag is just sky high, which it is. Great.
Sorry, go on, Jordan.
No, go on. You go.
I think from a Newcastle point of view as well, you've got to look at James Maddison's contract situation. He's got 2 years left on his contract, and throughout this window, Newcastle they've been stubborn with their valuation of players, and they're probably looking at James Maddison saying, in 12 months down the line, he's going to have 1 year left in his contract. You know, he's not going to be. Leicester couldn't possibly demand 60, 70 million. You look at the likes of Calvin Phillips, who's went this. I know obviously the different types of players, but Calvin Phillips, seasoned England international, he went for 45, 50 million. James Maddison's got one England cap, so logic would sort of tell you that they should ideally be valued around the same. Obviously, with Maddison being an attacking player, worth a little bit more. 12 months down the line, Leicester, the sort of power's taken away from them a little bit, and that's probably sitting in the back of Newcastle's mind.
Just also on Leicester, they're used to playing hardball. Look at what they did to Man United, getting 80 million for Harry Maguire. Look at what they're doing with Wesley Fofana and Chelsea, 40, 60, 80, sold. Look, they're probably just laughing at that original bid that's on screen there now, and they'll try and push it again. But I don't think Newcastle will come in with a third bid, and not at that price that they're looking for, and that's what they'll look elsewhere.
I think as well, you know, it's easy, isn't it, when you read that and when you see it and you see 20 million up front, you automatically go, bloody hell, 20 million. But there is a further 25 million to be paid. Now, how that's made up, we don't know. But let's not forget, you know, we sold the Mayosi Perez and they still owe us allegedly 8 million from that deal. I think this day and age, it's very rare that a club will offer the whole amount up front and go, there you go, there's 45 million or there's 50 million, 60 million. It is always done over chunks. So if our overall first offer is our latest offer is 45 million, okay, only 20 million up front. Like, you've got to look at the overall package, haven't you? Because in 2, 3, 4 years' time, we're still going to be paying the money for James Maddison. So, you know, say, for example, Leicester were interested, I don't know, in, I'll just pick someone off the top of my head.
Wood.
Yeah. Well, say they wanted Chris Wood and we wanted 15 million. And they said, we'll give you 4 million and then 12 million over the next 3 years, 4 million, you know, whatever. They would go, well, that's reasonable. Whereas, you know, would we look at it and go, bloody hell, only 4 million up front? But it's what it pays over the course of the deal. And I think it's easy to see, you know, different perspectives from different sides of the table. It's like Chelsea putting in the 80, well, allegedly going to put in the 80 million for Fofana. Leicester aren't going to get 80 million up front for Wesley Fofana. It's not going to happen. Chelsea will probably end up paying about 30, 40 million, and then it'll be 10 million a season. Because they won't put 80 million up front for Fofana. It just won't happen.
He'd be some sign of no boys, wouldn't he, James Maddison? I mean, speaking more as a supporter rather than a reporter, James, when the takeover happened, you know, I know we've showed up the back line and stuff, but the signings that excite you would be a James Maddison, wouldn't it? I mean, I don't think anybody's got more goal contributions over the past 18 months. That's English after Harry Kane. I think he's number 2. And somebody like that, I think, he'd be different gravy, wouldn't he?
I think, do you know what? I don't think the third one will come in. I think what we might see is we might see a potentially Newcastle making a serious bid for Paqueta. And obviously there's been rumours and links and stuff like that. I think they wouldn't. I don't think there'll be a third one for Maddison. It's obviously Paul Williams has brought this up saying is Paqueta likely. I think if they weren't to go in for him, I think they'll go for Paqueta because I think he's a lot cheaper than what Maddison would be. He fits probably what the cost and what they want to do going forward as well. He's that creative spark that we need as well in that middle of the park. Obviously, we know he can play in a few different positions as well, so ticks a lot of boxes. So I don't know. I think that's something that's possibly more likely to happen. But what would you say on that, Jordan and Charlie?
Yeah, I spoke about Paqueta last week. And again, I keep going back with, but at the start of the summer, it's a player Newcastle are aware of because of his relationship with Bruno. Rate him as a player, but always been a name that I've mentioned to people, and what I've got back is he's not on the agenda. That was at the start of the summer. Whether that's changed now, I'm not too sure. Maybe it's coming to the sort of the crunch time now where Newcastle do need to go out and sign someone that's gonna add goals or assists to the front line, and maybe because they haven't acquired other targets that they've went for, maybe they do look at the Paqueta deal and look at it and think, yeah, that is a deal that we can realistically do and one that we're interested in now. Obviously, there's been lots of noises around the player, but again, it's over the last few weeks, it's not a name that's been given to me as one that they're pressing ahead with, to be honest. So it might happen. I'm not saying it won't happen. It might happen towards the end of the transfer window, but I think ideally they probably want to sign a few others first or target a few others first before maybe falling back on the Paqueta deal.
Yeah, I definitely think it's one that, as you said, Jordan. Sorry, Charlie. It's going to be one that happens later the window. If they wanted him there and then to start, it was there. What the deal was all set up. The room was all set to do it straight away. It might be that they know what it takes to do the deal, and what they've thought is we'll explore different avenues before that, and we know we've got that we have to fall back on if needs be. Which it could be. It could be a deal. I think that could just be done like that if it was to happen. But I think you're right, Jordan. It'll be probably closer to the final week of the window, possibly.
Yeah, well, even if you look at the Bruno deal from Lyon as well, that was complete on the second last day of the January transfer window. So maybe it's one of them where Lyon wanted to cash in, and then Newcastle play tactical and don't put an offer until the final days of the transfer window, and Lyon probably feel like they do have to cash in on the player. So. It's one to watch in the next few weeks, or certainly in the build up to deadline day. But at this moment in time, I don't believe he's a player that is sort of prominent at the minute. Just have to. There's other players that they probably want to look at first before, as I say, falling back on that Paqueta deal. Because if they wanted to do the Paqueta deal, they would have done it. They would have done it by now, as you mentioned there, Rich. So I'm not ruling it out at all, but at this moment, I don't think he'll be through the door unless it's the final days of the transfer window.
Once again, Jordan says there is a chance. I like it. I like it. Charlie, you want to get in there?
Yeah. The Paqueta deal, again, I think Lyon are in a position of strength here. He's got 3 years left in his contract, and the Chronicle, we sort of reported that Lyon had a £58 million price tag set on him. This was at the start of the summer. So, and I don't think Newcastle will be prepared to pay that. There was reports, I don't know how reputable they are, from France about a month or so ago, saying that they dropped the valuation down to about 35 million. But the fact that Newcastle there's been no sniff of Newcastle acting on that, I wouldn't really buy into that too much. I think if it would happen, it would happen late in the window, maybe when Newcastle are still looking to make that sort of statement signing, and Lyon would have to sort of curb the demand slightly. I think a lot of the hysteria over Paqueta came from the fact he was having a kick about paying heads and volleys, and Bruno's back on wearing a Toon shirt, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I heard a yawn there.
Last couple of questions. One for Jordan, one for Charlie before we wrap up the show.
I just wanted to bring this one out. This was an interesting. There's a couple of interesting ones. It's more just points to ask. Matthew's mentioned about have we only got 40 million to spend? I think we've all said this for numerous weeks. We haven't got a budget. It's more if the opportunity arises at the right price, Newcastle will do the deal. And I think we were quoted having 40 million to start the window, 50. It's gone up, and it all depends on the right price for the right person, and Newcastle will do the deal. They've always said that on that one. And Tony Harrison just wanted to make a point that can anyone remember an unknown striker we signed from Bristol City, a certain Andrew Cole? This was about giving Pedro a chance if Newcastle got him, because obviously you looked at Andy Cole, he had potential and raw ability, and we saw what he went on to. So that was just an interesting one that to bring up regards to that, what we said at the start. So let's have a look, go back down the list here. Let's have a look. Jordan, I'll go with Jordan's because it was the first name on the list. Do you think Newcastle will smash the transfer record before the window?
No, I don't think they will. No. Transfer record's 40 million. Saying that, yeah. No, I have to sit on the fence. I'm gonna have to sit on the fence. If the opportunity comes up for a player that they really want, and they believe it's a good fee, then they'll break the record. Yeah. So yeah, sorry Tom, I will have to sit on the fence for that one unless Charlie fancies coming off the fence.
What was the question?
Do you think Newcastle will break the transfer record before the window shuts?
I've said all window. I thought they would. I've said that from back in April, May time. So I'm going to stick to my guns, and a half glass full kind of guy. I'm going to say yes. Was it 40 million? 40 million in it. We've already been putting bids in higher than that within the past fortnight for Maddison. So I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say yes, Tom.
Okay, and the last question here. I'll start with you, Charlie. Would you consider ASM as a make-weight in a deal for Pulisic and Gallagher?
No chance. Absolutely no way, Jose. Well, the front line is pretty toothless as it is. So taking the most creative spark out of that, I wouldn't be a fan of that, no. Plus, you'd be losing ASM and getting Pulisic. Nah, not for me.
Jordan?
No, I wouldn't swap St. Maxim for Gallagher. Pulisic, as much as I like the player, no, I would like to see St. Maxim stay put. I think touch what he's got a good season in him. So, a lot of fans have been quick to write St. Maxim off, but as I mentioned many times, let's just remember that this is a player that was the sort of the shining light of a very dark Steve Bruce era, and helped to keep the club up. So I wouldn't be writing St. Maxim off yet. I think the players earned the chance for fans to be patient with him and get right behind him, which I know a lot of fans do as well. So I'd keep St. Maxim and hope that he can have a strong season and show fans and us as well the type of player with we've seen in recent seasons.
Yeah, totally agree. Trolls, just want to say a huge thank you for your donations. Always appreciate everyone that donates to the channel. So thank you very much, Trolls.
Trolls.
And also a shout out to Jens, who's become a member. Obviously, if you like what you see at Night Anyone, don't forget to click the like button. It really helps get us up the algorithms and higher up the Newcastle channel charts. And also, if you've enjoyed it even so much that you consider becoming a member like Jens, there is a membership option on there for $1.99 a month, which is greatly appreciated. Pete.
To be fair, just to add on to the last part there, with Alan St. Maximin, we're looking at building our squad, not depleting it. So I won't be swapping a player like Alan St. Maximin for another player like Christian Pulisic. I want them both in the squad because if you've got one player, whether it's Alan St. Maximin coming off the bench or being subbed off for Pulisic, either way, it kind of enhances your squad, and that's what we're looking at right now. We're looking at building a squad that's capable of kind of pushing for European football. So that's just my thoughts on that. But look, it's been a fantastic show. Well over 500 watching over the course of the show tonight. If you haven't already, on the way out, just click that thumbs up just to support the show and give us an opportunity for others to see the show in how it's kind of building as a channel over the last year and a bit. So if you haven't already, click the thumbs up. If you're not already, click the subscribe button to become obviously a subscriber of the channel. There's I think a little mention on there to become a member, and obviously we've talked about Jens becoming a member tonight already, so please click that already if you haven't, and become a member of Loaded Mag NUFC. Look, Charlie, Jordan, massive thank you to you for joining us tonight. Great chat as always. And like I said, we wanted a bit of a discussion tonight because we wanted to give it something a little bit different. Do not scratch your eyes. The Watford podcast, absolutely spot on tonight. Brilliant from Justin and Pete with their kind of opinions on Pedro. Take that what you will. We'll see how that develops over the next week or so. But until then, you guys take care. And Daz, let's go for the sponsors.
Exactly. Yeah, sorry, I thought you forgot. Well done, you remembered. So shout out to shybarns.com and the range that Simon has. They're available as you know already. All t-shirts, hoodies, and also the loaded t-shirt in various different colors. So check that out. And there's a cup and a water bottle as well available through shybarns.com. Then pens and prints, and a shout out to Dean and the range he has available. And we all know what they have already, but as Richie said, there's a shower one incoming, so we'll see that when it comes up. And also shout out to Retro NUFC and the range that he has available. And yeah, you check out the latest, check Twitter, check the website. He's always chopping and changing there, so always keep an eye. Good one to follow if you don't follow it already. Machine House as well. Shout out to Marty, who's in the chat as well earlier, saw him as well, and the range that Marty has available, and he's got as we said before, some new t-shirts coming online as well, and the black and white one is going to be popular as well, that he's going to put out, so keep an eye on that. So that's it for the sponsors. Just in a shout out as to what's coming next. First of all, if you haven't seen it already, catch up on the United show with the Magpie channel and ourselves from earlier in the week. And then on tomorrow at 7:30, I think it is. Yeah, we have away days, Pete. Isn't that right?
We are. And look, as Daz has already said, we had the Magpie channel on Monday. We're always looking to bring something a little bit different and a little bit of quality to our content, as always. And the one thing we've always done is the away days from when we've kicked off on our Newcastle United content. We've got the Noisy Neighbours joining us, the Noisy Neighbours podcast, Man City podcast, all the way from the United States, but huge Man City fans podcast that are going to join us and talk all things Manchester City. I think there's going to be one or two things interesting that they're going to say on this podcast tomorrow night, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what they're going to say in a little bit more detail. But yeah, the Noisy Neighbours, a new podcast. We've got Luke that's joining us from a previous podcast from last season. So we're going to have a three-pronged attack of Man City fans talking Newcastle United and Man City content. So it's going to be an interesting one. Look forward to that for sure. Please do join in.
You might get their opinion, Pete, on Christian Pulisic as well, being from the USA. Just a thought on him. Yeah, cool. Of course you will. Never in doubt. And then on Sunday we have a reaction show on the Man City, our victory over Man City on Sunday. Join us to celebrate that in style. So bring that on Sunday evening as well. I think it's at 8 o'clock. So that's it for what's coming on the next one. And of course, if a player drops, we will be Graham Bailey tweeting just again right now. I like the sound of that because I've the poster.
I've seen it. It's a very little bit of interest. It's not massive. It's not distinctive, but there's that little bit of interest in there again. And look, I'm sure that Graham Bailey over the course of the next couple of weeks will come on and talk a little bit of Newcastle if things progress. But look,
is there enough Pete for exactly? Is there enough for
the Jordan boys, Charlie and Jordan? What more do we need?
The likely lads.
Is there enough to link in for Jordan to link in a question to Graham Bailey's tweet? That's to ask Eddie that question. That's all I want to know. That's one question, Jordan. One question, one job.
There's always a question.
I'll see what I can do. Go
back. I'll be celebrating Jordan, that day. You do.
Jordan will be back on next week saying I'm banned.
Love it, Chris. Love it.
I would love it.
Love it.
Right, that's it, lads.
Boys.
I guess I should press the button.
You guys take care. We'll have a fantastic
Cheers, boys.
Cheers, Charlie. Cheers, Jordan.
Cheers, lads.
After.
Eddie. How? Oh.